Well, hello, everybody. I'm Shari Kondrup from the Township Municipal Utilities Authority, and welcome to tonight's presentation on Deicers and the environment. And this is Karen Walzer from the Barnegat Bay Partnership. And before we start tonight's presentation, I'd just like to give you a little bit of information about Brick Utilities. We provide potable water to more than 100,000 residents in Brick, Point Pleasant Borough, the Ramtown section of Howe, and Point Pleasant Beach Borough as well. Hello, clicker, why aren't you working now? Technical difficulties. What's going on? What just happened?
I don't know, try advancing on your,
There we go.
yeah, there we go.
We got it going again. Okay, this is the Barnegat Bay watershed, and here's the Barnegat Bay estuary. And this is the location of the Matitaconk River watershed. We get over 80% of our water supply from this watershed. Okay, it also provides a significant amount of fresh water to the Barnegat Bay. And one of our missions is to educate residents on the ways they can conserve water and help maintaining and improving water quality within this watershed as well as the Barnegat Bay. Karen, would you like to introduce the Barnegat Bay Partnership and Jersey Friendly Yards?
Absolutely. Thank you, Shari. We're very happy to host Shari's webinar tonight because Brick MUA is one of our partners. That's how Barnegat Bay Partnership works. It's a national estuary program. And we have many partners from government, academic institutions, businesses, and community organizations, and private individuals even working together to help to protect the water quality and the natural resources of not only the bay itself, but the entire watershed, as you saw on the map that Shari just showed you. So that is what we do. That's our website. Visit it, and if you want to learn more about what we do and Barnegat Bay.
Okay, and Jersey Friendly Yards?
Jersey Friendly Yards is, thank you, is a second website that we created and manage. And the reason we created it is that there's a lot that individuals can do to protect the water quality, not only in their own communities, but throughout the watershed, and of course, protecting it in the bay. So we created this online guide to what you can do in your own yard for a healthy environment. And it's all about, using less fertilizers and pesticides, capturing stormwater in your own yard through native plantings, and much more than that. There's a lot of information on the website. So check it out and see what you can do to make your yard healthier for everybody in the watershed. Thanks, Shari.
Oh, thank you, Karen. So on to tonight's presentation on deicers and the environment. So during the early 20th century, ice and snow removal consisted of manually shoveling it off of streets, and today it is removed mechanically and deicers are applied to road surfaces prior to winter storm events, making the roads safe for traveling as well as preventing accidents. And also to prevent accidents from happening on sidewalks, many of us use deicers to keep them safe and to prevent legal implications via fines as per local ordinances or injury litigation. Now this graph shows the annual road salt usage for 1975 to 2017 throughout the entire United States. And as you can see, it has been rising exponentially throughout the years. And it was estimated in 2021 that over 25 million metric tons of salt were used. Now this graph shows the road salt usage in New Jersey from 2013 to 2021. And over here it shows the thousands of tons or gallons that were used, and here's the price that it cost the state. And even though this kind of shows what it rising, our usage of salt rising, but we do have a dip here over the last few years because we've had some minor winter weather, and hopefully that'll stay that way. Okay, and I just want you to keep this in mind. And even though deicers keep us safe after winter storm events, we pay a price with the damage to infrastructure to our roadways, sidewalks, structures, and bridges by repeated use and using excessive amounts. And we're all familiar how salt deicers damage our vehicles. Large animals are attracted to road salts, which may contain mineral concentrations that can aid in antler development and pregnancy. This also causes road hazards for vehicles that coming upon wildlife during twilight and at night. Birds may confuse the salt grains with seed and grit. Higher levels of salts have been found in drinking water sources for these creatures in the wintertime. And no matter how salts from deicers are consumed, health impacts for these animals include renal system failure, as well as ataxia, which is balance and coordination issues, depression, and the inability to fly or perch for terrestrial birds. Now, can deicers harm waterways? Yes, they can. So let's go quickly through how this can happen. Now, there are two types of pollution that affect our water quality. There's non-point source pollution and point source pollution. And I'm just going to briefly go over non-point source pollution right now. Okay, non-point source pollution is water pollution that comes from many different sources and cannot be traced back to an identifiable source. And how does this get into our waterways? Well, it can be blown in by the wind. It can be thrown in by people just being careless and tossing or dumping things into our streams, and also from rainwater or stormwater flowing into the storm drains in our street, which go to the rivers and all. And we've all seen these drains in our streets, known as stormwater drains. And if we're walking along a river or maybe a lake, we might see pipes going into it, and these are storm sewer outfalls. So when it rains, all this water flows into these storm drains and out into our streams via the storm sewer outfalls. And anything that's in our streets when it rains, such as litter, oil leaking from our cars, people not disposing of their pet waste properly, as well as overusing fertilizers and putting too much on, or putting them on the hard surfaces, or putting them on the wrong time of year, will all go into our streams, kind of creating a little bit of a polluted mess. Now, I'm going to go back here to the Metedeconk River watershed, which is highlighted up here. And I'm going to enlarge that a bit. All the lines that are white, orange, or green are roadways that are just within the Metedeconk River watershed. And this is only one watershed within the vast Barnegat Bay watershed. Anything that washes off those roads will go into the stream and eventually end out into the Barnegat Bay as well as the Atlantic Ocean. So keep that in mind, because municipalities will either spread a salt brine solution or rock salts on road for safety, okay, in the wintertime. And many of us will use the deicers on our drives and walkways for safety as well. And when it rains or that snow and ice melts, these deicers will wash off our drives and walkways into the streets, which then collects on the roadways and will be washed down the storm sewer systems into our streams. And the salt just doesn't go away. It kind of stays. Its tendency is to linger for a while. And after decades of use, scientific studies are showing higher salt concentrations in our streams during the summertime as well. So what's happening here? There's a couple things that are going on. As the salt mixes with the river water, some of it will go downstream with the flow of the river. And since salt water is also heavier than fresh water, it will sink to the bottom and settle into the sediments within the stream bed. And as more salt enters into the stream, the process repeats itself. So that's one way that salt's kind of hanging around a bit. What about groundwater? Can deicers affect our groundwater? Yes, it can. So what happens here is, I'm going to just go through groundwater systems real quick so we're all on the same level and we all understand what I'm talking about. Groundwater is water stored within the pores, cracks, and openings in subsurface rock material, such as soil and rock, okay? And layers of rock material that allows water to penetrate and flow freely in them are called permeable layers. And an aquifer is a body of rock material that holds groundwater. And there are two types of aquifers. We have unconfined aquifers, which have a water table, and then we have a confined aquifer. And impermeable layers of rock does not allow water to penetrate, and they often form the base of an unconfined aquifer and the boundaries of a confined aquifers. Now, I'm just going to talk about unconfined aquifers because they have the greatest impact on our surface water systems. And all. Okay, groundwater, okay, go back here. An unconfined aquifer is formed when water seeps into it from the ground directly above it. And we call this percolation. Water flows through the spaces between soil particles and pores within rocks. And water seeps out of the unconfined aquifer into surface bodies of water such as a lake, stream, wetland area, or even the ocean. And the water that's flowing into the stream, we would call this base flow. Now, non-point source pollution can contaminate an aquifer when it rains or snow and ice melts via percolation. So when road salts are washed off the streets, okay, it will accumulate in the soils along a road. And this is because not all roads have storm sewer systems attached to them. So it will wash off into the surrounding soil and everything. And these substances will concentrate in the soil after a while, saturate it, and as it stays in solution with the water, it will percolate into the groundwater itself. And to gain a better understanding of how the deicers work, we need to have a very basic understanding of their formation on the atomic level. I'm not going to get into anything complicated here because I am not a chemist. The bonds that these atoms form are known as ionic bonding, and simple things for you to understand is atoms have ionic charges. A negative charge ion or a negative charge atom is called an ion, and a positive charge one is called a cation. And that opposite charges attract, while those that are the same will repel each other. And we're going to show you a quick little demonstration using magnets here. Let me stop sharing my screen for a moment. Okay, can everybody see me here? Can you see me?
Yeah, you're good, Shari. We can see you.
Okay, so here I have two little magnets, and the sides are marked differently. I don't know if you can see it really well. We have, there we go. The same charge is marked through the middle or on the edge. So when I take my stick and I put one magnet on it, okay, and I take the side that's oppositely charged from it and put it on, oh, there we go, they attract. When I take the same side that has the same charge to it, it will repel just like that. And that's kind of like the same concept of ionic bonding when it comes between two differently charged or similarly charged atoms. Let me go back to sharing my screen here for a moment. Here we go. Okay. So, what we see here is metals have cations while nonmetals are anions. So a sodium chloride or rock salt is made up of a sodium atom and a chlorine atom. Now this shows a sodium chloride crystal. When it's mixed with water, the crystal will break apart, and the chlorine and the sodium atoms are surrounded or hugged by the water molecules. Now let's see how the deicers, water, and soil interact with each other. Soil particles tend to have a negative charge, and the denser the soil particles, such as clay, will have more negative charges to it as opposed to a particle of sand, which will have fewer. Now, on metals such as manganese, and nutrients like potassium have a positive charge, these elements will bind to the soil particles, providing nutrients to plants and soil structure. When stormwater happens to flow through this soil that's tainted with the deicers, such as sodium chloride, okay, the positive atoms are going to exchange places with each other. So the manganese and the potassium are going to mix in with the water molecules, while the sodium will go to the soil particle. And there's only so many of these positive atoms or anions or cations, whatever, will form with the soil particle or adhere to the negative charges of the soil particle. So the chlorine and the potassium and the manganese will all go mix in with the water and stuff, and the sodium goes to soil. And as the water flows now out of the soil particle and goes into the groundwater, what have you, it now is carrying these nutrients and metals with it. Okay, and this is known as the cation exchange capacity. And I'm not going to go into explaining that in detail. I'm going to be sending you out information on it so you have it and you can read up on it later and all. In waterways, these excess nutrients can cause harmful algal blooms, as in the excess sodium in the soil is bad for the plants that are not adapted to it, and it also causes soil instability as well as erosion. So, Salt gets into our rivers via surface water runoff, okay? And also from salt that percolates into the groundwater in unconfined aquifers from the snow and ice melting. So the stream becomes salty from the surface water runoff and the recharge from a salty aquifer. And as this fresh water becomes salty from the salts being released from the sediments and recharged from the salt-saturated groundwater, the freshwater aquatic vegetation will die off, and freshwater aquatic species will move to fresher water upstream. And this allows the invasive aquatic species to move in that are better suited for salty conditions and all. Now, studies conducted by the Darren Freshwater Institute at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in 2016 through 2017 showed that high concentrations of sodium chloride and calcium chloride reduced the size and mass of rainbow trout anywhere from 9% to 27% and 11 to 31% respectively, which may have an effect for the health of recreational trout fisheries. Higher salt concentrations affected the diversity and quantity on zooplankton, and these are microscopic creatures that feed on algae, so consider them to be the grazers of the water world. Thus, this can cause an increase in algae and algal blooms. It affects the food chain for fish and other aquatic species, as well as decreasing dissolved oxygen levels that are needed by these species to survive. And then macroinvertebrates such as dragonfly larvae that was exposed to high salt concentrations for long periods could not recover from injuries when compared to those living in less saline conditions. Chronic exposure to salination could have other long-term implications for the insects and also for other creatures on the food chain. Research from the University of Toronto's Macaulay Lab indicates that exposure to road salt appears to negatively impact the appetite of adult dragonflies. It showed a decrease in the number of mosquitoes that they eat, which could impact the number of mosquitoes in the environment and increase a vector for disease transmission. And we know one disease that mosquitoes can transmit in our area is West Nile virus. Studies have also shown that road salt deicers are affecting amphibians by causing them to bloat in some frog species and in other species dehydration, such as in salamanders. Egg masses may also be affected by de-icing compounds. The egg mass on the left was taken from a roadside pond. It has more eggs to it as well as a darker jelly than the one on the right, which is taken from a cleaner source of water. So we're unsure if these eggs are any more viable than what the cleaner one appears to be. And remember that composition of soil is changed by de-icers as well. So native plants that are not adapted to saline soils will die off and invasive species will take over, and this will affect habitat for the native wildlife as in freshwater aquatic environments. Changes in the soil structure can also lead to erosion. And here's some photos of damages to the landscape caused by salt spray from vehicles and wind or runoff from snow and ice melt. Salt-based deicer causes changes to physical soil structure, which can deplete nutrients and water retention for plants' needs, thus causing leaf and needle die-off, as well as a condition known as witch's broom, and eventually death. And when groundwater sources are affected by salt pollution, as well as surface water that we use for potable needs, it will contaminate our potable sources. So not all treatment processes can effectively remove salt, while those that can are extremely expensive, which means that your water bills will go up. And it can affect our health or exacerbate existing health conditions within all of us. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't be using de-icers because we need them to keep our environment safe during inclement weather in the wintertime. But we need to know how we can use them responsibly. And here are some of the more common deicers that are on the market. And all deicers, whether or not labeled as environmentally safe, will have some impact on our water sources and the environment. So let's take a look at some of these and what their impacts can be. Good old sodium chloride, which is rock salt. In the water, it increases metal and chloride concentrations in surface and groundwater supplies. Excess chloride loading in freshwater bodies affects the survival of freshwater creatures and plants, and it may influence the spread of salt-tolerant invasive species and non-native species. In the soil, it breaks down the soil structure. It decreases the permeability of the soil so it can't absorb water as easily, and it may increase mental mobility through the soils. Vegetation causes leaf scorch and osmotic stress, and osmotic stress is a condition where plants can't absorb water and can disrupt the uptake of the nutrients for the plant. It reduces the root's ability to uptake water from the soil, leading to dehydration, and collapses plant root tissues. It can cause cellular damage, which can lead to reduced shoot growth and drought-like symptoms as well. It may also influence the spread of salt-tolerant invasive species and non-native species. In wildlife, it causes salt poisoning in birds, as well as vehicle strikes with birds and mammals. And initiates and accelerates corrosions on exposed metal and concrete reinforcement bars, and it causes cement deterioration with our infrastructure. Calcium chloride increases metal and chloride concentrations in surface and groundwater supplies, as well as the chloride loading in freshwater bodies affects the survival of freshwater species. The calcium can improve soil structure, but the chloride may increase metal mobility. Calcium helps plant growth, but the chloride causes osmotic stress and leaf scorch. In wildlife, there are little to no known effects at this point in time that studies are showing. With infrastructure, the paved and metal surfaces stay wet longer, potentially increasing corrosion rates. Magnesium chloride increases metal and chloride concentrations in surface and groundwater supplies. The excessive chloride loading in freshwater bodies affects the survival of freshwater species. The magnesium will improve soil structure, and again, the chlorides may increase metal mobility. Magnesium helps plant growth. Chloride causes osmotic stress and leaf scorch, and it may influence the spread of salt-tolerant invasive species and non-native species. And again, there's little to no effects when it comes to wildlife. Infrastructure causes metal and cement deterioration, and the cement deterioration may accelerate from the magnesium reactions. Calcium, magnesium acetate, and potassium acetate. Heavy metals released from soil will enter the groundwater and surface water supplies. Dissolved oxygen demand in water bodies associated with acetate degradation decreases oxygen availability for aquatic creatures and plants. It improves the soil structure and allows for releases of heavy metals from the soil into the environment. It can cause osmotic stress in vegetation at very high levels. Again, there's little to no effects on wildlife at this point that we're aware of, and less corrosive than chloride-based deicers, but it accelerates metal corrosion. And agricultural byproducts, which are complex sugars from root crops and grains. And when we talk about root crops, the main one is the good old sugar beet. And then we have the manufactured organic materials. In the water, they cause nutrient enrichment in surface water bodies from the phosphorus and nitrogen compounds within them. It increases dissolved oxygen demand by the deterioration of the organic compounds in it. It increases aquatic vegetation, causing harmful algal blooms, and depletes dissolved oxygen for aquatic creatures. And it may increase heavy metals into the environment. With soils, it may increase the heavy metals as well. Vegetation and wildlife, there's little to no effects that we are aware of at this point in time, and it may initiate and accelerate corrosion of metals and cement, and this requires further evaluation. And then there's the good old abrasive sand, which just increases turbidity and sedimentation in surface water bodies. And you'll get charts on these at the when I mail out information to you tomorrow. Now, each deicer has a temperature that they are effective to. So not all deicers melt ice down to the same temperature. And this chart kind of demonstrates this. As we see, sodium chloride will melt down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, calcium chloride to -20, magnesium chloride to 5, calcium magnesium acetate to 20 degrees, and potassium acetate to -15. Agricultural byproducts and manufactured organic materials. There was no information provided in the literature that I had researched on it. It also depends upon what other compounds are mixed in with them. And then abrasives such as sand, they do not melt ice. They're only used for traction. So use a deicer that will be effective for the temperatures in your area. And if you still see freezing happening, then you want to use an abrasive. And make sure that you read the labels. These provide the directions and guidelines for use, the temperature that the product will melt ice to, the ingredients, and precautions and disposal methods that should be followed. And packaging labels are not regulated by government agencies. So let's look at a few products to see the difference within the packaging. And right now I have to make the statement, Brick Utilities and the Barnegat Bay Partnership does not endorse any of these manufacturers or products. They are only being used as examples for informational purposes. Okay. Now, These ice melts are made by the same company. And by the names, I would think that the one here called Eco Melt would be the most friendly to the environment. All claim to be pet friendly, all melt ice on contact, and reduce corrosion to vehicles and property. Now, some de-icers will have additives to help reduce corrosion to metal, the key word being reduce, and there is usually a disclaimer added on the package stated when used as directed. And some of these corrosion inhibitors may also be damaging to the environment. Now, these are the ingredients for each of these products obtained from their safety data sheets. And as you can see, every single one of them has sodium chloride in it, okay, which we know is damaging to the environment. Okay, and it also is corrosive to metals and concrete as well. And two of them list proprietary organic salt and polyol blends. And we have no idea what these blends are, since this is unique to this company and this manufacturer. These blends could deplete oxygen levels in water resources and may have substances that can increase nutrients in aquatic environments. And here it's showing some of the listed ingredients as being not classified, or they're considered not to be hazardous. Okay, these classifications are established by OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and that's only pertaining to human health risks. And as we all know, if we eat too much salt, it's going to be dangerous for us. It can, cause issues for us. If you want to get more information on the product, the safety data sheets, or SDSs as they're also known, are usually available on the manufacturer's website, and it provides the product's ingredients, as well as toxicological, ecological, and disposal information, which may not be on the packaging label. Now, another group is Ice Beater, and these products may be interpreted as environmentally friendly and safe since it contains beet extracts and it has cute icons of beets doing cool things. Especially here, Ice Beater responsible. He's hugging a tree. What could be better for the environment than that, right? Now, just so you're aware of it, beet extracts do not melt ice. This is a sugar that makes the products cling to surfaces so there is less scatter when applying the product onto the surfaces. Okay. When we look at the ingredients, all contain 3 to 4 different chlorides, whether if it's sodium, magnesium, calcium chloride, or potassium chloride. And we all know that they have some impact on our environment. And I sit here and I look at these, I look at the responsible melter as well as the treated ice melter, and they both melt down to the same temperature, to minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The only difference is that this has calcium magnesium acetate, which is a little bit friendlier to the environment, and this one just contains all of the different various chlorides. And also, just as in food packaging, the ingredient listed at the top is the one that has the most concentration within the product. It's the same way with your de-icers too. Okay. So, here are a few tips when using de-icers. Do not salt while snowing or before. Either shovel periodically as it snows, or wait until it stops and clear the snow before it changes to ice. I know my experience is when I've shoveled ice and snow, or when I shoveled snow in the past, the sooner you got out there when it stopped snowing, the easier it was to shovel. Try to shovel to a bare surface if possible. And if it's a light, fluffy snow, such as a light dusting, it can be swept off the surfaces with a broom. Then salt if necessary. Remember that all de-icers can't melt ice past certain temperatures. If the one you are using will not melt past falling temperatures in your area and the pavement is still icy or refreezes, use a different de-icer or use sand for traction. And don't use too much. A 12-ounce mug is enough to salt 10 sidewalk squares or a 20-foot driveway. Try leaving about 1 to 2 inches between the particles, and this is enough to melt the ice. And when the pavement has dried, sweep up any excess that may still be on the walk. Store it in a bucket and use it for the next event. Do not rinse the paved areas with a hose. This may cause the area to refreeze or will go down the storm drains in the street, affecting our water supplies. And evaluate where a de-icer is necessary and only salt areas that you need to. If you're not using that patio in the wintertime or during snowy weather, you don't necessarily need salt out there. Definitely dig a path if it snows so that you have a safe way to get out of the house in case of an emergency. You may only need to use a deicer or salt on the walkway to the front door and your driveway, and as well as the sidewalk along the streets, since most towns require those areas to be kept clear of snow and ice. And some of you may use a snow removal service. Ask questions to see if the contractor is aware of salt-wise practices, and ask for proof of certification they may have obtained from snow removal and de-icer use for these things. One organization that provides training that's recognized throughout the country is SEMA, or the Snow and Ice Management Association. They may have obtained, and they give like lots of courses to professionals concerning the use of ice and safe snow removal practices and all. States such as Minnesota, Wisconsin, and New Hampshire also offer certification for professionals. And some of the more conscientious snow removal contractors may have taken courses elsewhere from these states, and those certifications are okay for New Jersey. New Jersey, as of yet, has not come up with a certification process for snow removal services. Confirm the procedures that they're using. Make sure they're aware that mechanical removal is more effective and safer than excessive de-icer application, and that they're using mechanical removal first, and that they're using the right amount of a de-icing chemical, such as 1 to 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet. And determine the de-icing equipment that they're using, and if they calibrate it on a regular basis to maintain the above recommendation. And yes, those salt spreaders that are on the back of their trucks, and even the manual ones that they use on the sidewalks and stuff, they can be calibrated. And discuss their protocols when using de-icers. Which products works best to specific temperatures? Do they use weather forecasts to help determine the severity event? Do they use pavement temperatures to determine de-icers used? And yes, people, there are thermometers out there that can do surface temperatures, not the ones that we've been using for COVID to check our body temperatures with. They're not going to be effective out there. But I don't expect you to go out and buy a pavement thermometer or surface thermometer for this. They may have them. Usually the pavement temperature is warmer than the air surface, or the air temperature, excuse me. So they may not need to use a de-icer that goes down to 20, to minus 15, when the pavement may only go down to 20 degrees. For you, based upon the air temperatures for your own personal use if you're not using a contractor. And communicate your concerns about protecting your paved surfaces, landscapes, and the water resources. And let them know if they've applied too much salt, if they have done that. And remember, if they're using less salt, it should cost you less in the long run. Plus, you're helping the environment as opposed to using more salt per se. Okay, and remember, once you put salt down, it doesn't go away. It alters the composition of soil, slows plant growth, and weakens concrete, brick, stone that make our homes, garages, and bridges and roads. It travels into our lakes, rivers, streams, and wetlands, putting our aquatic life at risk and endangering our freshwater resources. And it only takes 1 teaspoon of salt to permanently pollute 5 gallons of water. Now, do we have any questions at all?
So one question did come in, Shari.
Okay.
In the very beginning, I think is when you were showing some of your graphs. And the question is, why did the cost go up when the usage went down?
That's a good question. Because the price of everything keeps going up. That's one thing. It's hard to say. But I think that is like the main question. When the salt usage went down in New Jersey for those last couple of years that was shown on that chart, it could very well be that the price of the materials went up. But who knows? Okay, I don't know the definite answer to that.
Okay, another question. Can you share ideas on brine versus granular salts?
It's hard for people to find brine products as opposed to the granular. And all that the brine does, it prevents the salt from scattering, like some of your products will do. They'll scatter that are granular when they put them down. The brine also will prevent like a heavy snowfall. It will prevent the snow from adhering to the surface, making it easier to plow or shovel up. And that is one reason why we see municipalities and state road crews putting down that brine solution first. It makes it easier for them to get it off the paved surfaces, and it also makes it safer on the roadways for you. Some of the granular products will have directions on them and how you can make a brine solution with them so that you can apply it on your sidewalks and driveways. If you're uncomfortable doing that, then I recommend that you don't. I don't want to jinx this because we've had a really mild winter so far with the snowfall and everything. We don't get really super, super heavy snows, in my opinion, and that's basically my opinion of where you might actually need a brine solution on it. It's hard for people to find it for like a homeowners. Some of the department or the home centers may carry it, and you might be able to find it online. And just follow the package directions, okay?
Is it possible to get a printed copy of questions to ask contractors?
I will do my best to get that information for you. Let me just share my screen again real quick here. Bear with me. I'm going to send you out this this graph or this flow chart too, so you understand the ways it goes. If you go into Wisconsin Saltwise website, and I'll send you this information as well, they have a ton of information and informative videos on the deicers and the impacts on the environments, and they give tips to homeowners as well. And all, so that's one group to look at. I will see if I have information on that, and I will send you out, some questions that you can ask. And I will include that slide as well, so that we showed with our little snow removal person there.
Yeah, that slide, Shari, is a good summary. I think that might be what he was even referring to.
Yeah, we can send that information out to you. Okay, any other questions?
Let's see. I don't see, let me just check the Q&A. I don't see any. Oh, yeah, here we go. Can you comment what can be done to discourage, well, particularly it says Brick Township, from allowing businesses to build parking lots so close to waterways?
Wow.
Okay, so it really doesn't have to do with salt. It's more asking about constructing parking lots close to waterways, and then they have a specific example.
Sure.
Without much of a buffer. I don't know if you want to answer that or.
What do they have? What was the example?
Specifically the Merrymakers on Herbertsville Road and the new Aldi's, which were both paved recently, don't seem to have much of a buffer.
Wow.
I mean, buffers are very, very important for protecting waterways, but about those specific sites I'm not familiar with. I don't know.
Those specific sites, Merrymakers, I can't picture where that is in Brick. Aldi's, was that built was that put into an existing shopping center? See, when it comes to buffers, from what my understanding are, the state does require a certain amount of footage between the streams and usually roadways and buildings just in general per se. And in New Jersey, and correct me if I'm wrong with that, when it comes to the Category 1 buffers, which basically are all the streams within the Matiticonk watershed, it should be a 300-foot buffer.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's a couple follow-ups from the person that asked the question.
Sure.
Well, first a comment. They say the salt from the parking lot gets into the waterway, and it's where the old Allen Farms used to be, which used to be a dirt parking lot. And then another question that someone else asked, I believe, would rain gardens make any difference in the amount of salt entering rivers, lakes, and the ocean?
Yeah, okay. Going back to the parking lot issue, there is, I believe, a law in the books, and I'm using law loosely here, that if a structure is being built in an existing footprint of a previous one. So basically, if you have a foundation, you knock a building down, you have a foundation that's still in place, you can rebuild on that foundation per se. The buffer that's already there is pretty much what's left, can be still used. And when the situation with the parking lot at Merrymakers, where the old Allen Farms was, I know exactly where that is now. They paved that. It's in an existing parking lot, even though it was gravel beforehand. They may have been able to get a variance with it. It's hard to say when it comes to private property, what the towns allow and what the towns don't allow, but they should be following what the state regulations are, or what exceptions these people can come up with and get. As for rain gardens, yes, rain gardens can help mitigate some of the salt flowing into the stream, into our streams and surface water bodies. So yes, I would say rain garden would help. If you're going to use a rain garden, then definitely make sure you have salt tolerant species in it. And again, you can go to the Jersey Friendly Yards website to find out what species are salt tolerant and which ones aren't. And make sure you're using native plants that are adapted to our region. Okay? Any other questions?
Yeah, another question was, how do you dispose of rock salt or sodium chloride that you already own, but I guess not going to be used? How do you dispose of it?
That's a good question. I would go to the SDS sheet per se on that product. I don't know for sure, because if it's not labeled as a hazardous product, it may not, you might be able it may be able to go to local landfill. But check with the local town and see what they may recommend, and also check with the SDS sheet to see what they are recommending as well. My guess is you don't want to just dump it on the side of the road. You don't want to dump it in your yard. The best thing would be to dispose of it through the sanitation department, or through the solid waste management department.
Yeah, or maybe even when they have one of the hazardous,
It's
not
waste
that
day.
salt is hazardous, but when they have one of the hazardous materials days where you can turn things in.
Yeah. But check with them, call them up and ask them. They should be able to help you out. And if they say, yeah, just dump in the backyard, that's the wrong answer.
Sometimes it's almost like if you can use it
Yeah.
in the proper way, sometimes that's
Yeah.
the best way to
The best way. I mean, if you can use it, for another winter event or whatever, yeah, if it's solid, because we do know these things, they do like to make one big clump after a while.
Mm.
And it's a pain to break it, but you might be able to break it up and reuse it again. Okay.
All right, one more question, very a difficult one, because I certainly don't know the answer. Are there contractors in Hunterdon County? Oops, I lost the question. Who will make permeable parking lots?
Oh, are there contractors to make permit?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure in Hunterdon County, but you would have to look around and find out. I'm not aware of any contractors per se. If they specialize in permeable pavements, because there are landscapers that do specialize in that as well, just check around and ask the questions. They're out there. Where they are located, I'm not sure, within New Jersey itself.
Yeah, I have I don't know if they could answer the question, but the Rutgers Water Program does a lot of education about green infrastructure, including permeable parking lots. So if you Google Rutgers Water Program, green infrastructure, you'll see them on the website, and then I would contact them and ask if they have any recommended contractors. They might not be able to be specifically Hunterdon County, but it would be statewide ones.
The other thing too is there is a certain method that when they install these permeable pavers and stuff for permeable pavement, that needs to go in place. And there is a maintenance process to maintain that permeability, because if you don't maintain it properly, the porosity of that pavement will fill in with sand and sediment and what have you, and it'll start to clog it up. So there are procedures that you have to follow to keep it clean as well.
Yeah, basically power washing it periodically
That's one thing, yeah.
to get it if it's not too big of an area. All right, let's see. But they are fantastic. I've seen them in action and
Yeah.
it lets the water through, especially helpful in winter, which I think is why Doug asked this question. He asked it because the water does permeate through it, then you don't get ice forming on the top. So it's really great for safety reasons.
Oh, it is. And I think there are a lot of the parking areas up in the University of New Hampshire that have been using this type of payment for a while or doing experiments with it as well.
All right, so let me check and see if anyone else put something new in the chat. No. So I think you have answered all the questions. There were several comments.
I just saw one pop up. Yes, you're right.
Okay.
The rain gardens do not get rid of the salt, but they do help to slow it down. And there's a collection place for it so it doesn't get into our surface water supplies and all. Okay. A couple of things real quick. If you're interested in becoming a citizen scientist, check out the Watershed Institute's New Jersey Watershed Watch Network. They have a program that allows you to help them monitor road salt in our waterways. The other organization out there is the Isaac Walton League of America, and this is a national network that has championed protection for our natural resources for over 100 years. And they have numerous citizen science programs, which include river monitoring for salts and chlorides, as well as other things. Okay, we'll send that information out to you tomorrow or the following day. Okay, anything else?
That is it. I'm just double checking, but no, you answered all the questions and several people commented on how great the presentation is, very informative. One person said they especially liked the cartoons and illustrations that really showed the processes you were describing.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you everyone for attending. And thank you, Shari, for a great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you all. And if there aren't any more questions, have a wonderful night.